overall, let's just say right now, do you think it was a good thing that Rand ran for president?
That it occurred. Okay. I'm going to say no.
Wow, okay.
I'm not saying it's necessarily bad. Maybe time will tell. But to me, Ron Paul had built a lot of coalitions along the way. All right. Constitutional conservatives built a coalition with Ron Paul. Libertarians. Regular old Republicans that just maybe realized he was a better old school Taftian sort of Republican. They all sort of came together, and Ron got decent numbers, actually, in the presidential primaries for considering what he is. Considering he is really technically a fringe candidate, a guy just out there spouting libertarian philosophy, talking about not bombing everyone, talking about ending the war on drugs. And people talk about this stuff now. People actually do talk about this stuff now to some extent. Nobody talked about this before. People might forget. People that didn't watch debates before 2008, nobody talked about these things. These were not things that it was assumed we're going to bomb people all over the world. It was assumed that we had a Federal Reserve that was never going to be mentioned in a debate. Things were just assumed. Ron Paul busted this paradigm open. And that's where his support came from. But along the way, he was able to build a lot of coalitions for people that, saw their views lining up with him in many ways, especially as he inspired more and more people and, made millions in money bombs and all this stuff. On the flip side, we have the Rand Paul campaign, which clearly didn't do any of what I just described. Okay, so there's two reasons to run a campaign, and they might not be separate reasons. They might both be happening at the same time, but you can either run a, purely strategic campaign where you're just trying to win. That's what many Rand Paul supporters said he was doing the whole time. He's running this strategic campaign. That's why he's got to say these certain things to please the neocons, but then say these certain things to please the libertarians and keep them around. Well, guess what? He did none of those things. Neither of those things happened. Neocons still think he's a quote-unquote isolationist and a crazy libertarian like his dad. And then libertarians now don't support him in nearly the numbers that they supported his father. So if neither of those two, and the other reason you would run a campaign is to purely, be an educational campaign and purely be laying out liberty principles and ideals and that kind of thing. Well, that's not what Rand Paul was doing either. Rand Paul wasn't out there laying out his beliefs, laying out his principles. Occasionally, he would work some of that stuff in. I'm not saying he doesn't have solid, principles and beliefs, but that's not the message he was delivering. He was delivering policy messages based on being a constitutional conservative. All right, well, what the hell principles are involved in that? None, really. It's a political stance. And when you're just taking political stances, you're just another politician. And I think that's why in Iowa, you saw the numbers. It was about a quarter of the votes that Ron Paul got. And Ron Paul was the one painted as the extreme fringe no chance candidate, whereas Rand Paul started off, as you mentioned on the last show, he started off being talked about as a top-tier candidate and ended up as the fringe candidate. So what the hell happened there? So yeah, I'm going to say that based on that ranty analysis, no, what was the point? What was the point? And he's a great senator. He's the best senator by far. I think he's better than any other senator in there. He showed up for the most votes of anybody running, so I don't think it really hurt what he was doing in the Senate. So it didn't detract from that. But I'm glad he's going back to the Senate. I think he should have just stayed there and maybe thought about running for president down the road when he maybe thought a little bit deeper about why his father's campaign had so much success.
Longest rant ever.
Yeah, and deserved. I should keep going.